30 years ago. Believe it or not, I was actually one of the writers on the original A-Team. And I've told people, it's kind of interesting that the A-Team became such a part of our pop culture lexicon. And then 20 years later, or 15 years later, I work on a show that has also become a part of our pop culture lexicon, Xena. To do that once is actually considered pretty rare, so I was lucky enough to have it happen to me twice. And my ultimate dream is to do a mashup movie with the A-Team. Because she really can make a plan come together. But I've been writing for a lot of different shows. As I mentioned, the A-Team, the first show I ever wrote for was a show called Riptide. That was with Stephen J. Cannell Productions for NBC. But I also worked on Jesse Hawks, Stingray, J.J. Starbuck, Hardcastle McCormick, Superboy, Swamp Thing. I mentioned it earlier, somebody's kind of cool that I can forget all my credits. She Spies. But Xena will always be just an incredible experience of all my shows. You know, people ask me what my favorite show is. The first show I ever did is always going to have a special part in my memory, and that was Riptide. I worked with some incredible people there. The exec producer was a woman named Babs Grayhowski, and the producer was a guy named Tom Blomquist, both of which are still my closest friends today. Now, all the stuff I've done in the past, leading up to Xena. Well, as you know, Hercules was a very, very popular show. And as you probably know, Xena was a spinoff from Hercules. Xena had appeared originally, I believe, she was only supposed to be in 2 episodes of Hercules. But she was so popular with the station managers around the country that they kept saying, yes, we'll redo Hercules. Of course, we love Hercules, but who's this woman? She's pretty interesting. So I believe it was Dan Philly, who was the president of Universal at that time, Universal Television, thinking very quickly, he said, that's our new series. That's the ticket, it's our new series. So he called Rob real quick and said, you've got to find a way to redeem this character so we can turn it into a true series. And so we ended up with a 3-part episode on Hercules. So I wasn't involved in that. But I got a phone call from Babs Grayhowski, exec producer on Riptide, because Babs was actually the original supervising producer on Xena. She had been hired. If you look at the first 6 episodes, her name is on there. She called me and she said, I've been hired to work on the show. And she goes, there's a character on the show I think you would really love to write. She goes, the only footage we have is everything that was done on Hercules, but there's a character you would really love to write. And that character was Salmonius. She thought Salmonius and I had the same type of personality. And sometimes I can talk like Rob Trevor. Hi, I'm Rob Trevor. I love Rob Trevor. So I thought, okay, well, I'll check it out. So Babs brought me in to meet RJ and Rob, RJ Stewart, Rob, Liz Friedman, and everybody else. And during the meeting, I was sitting there wanting to ask questions about where was this show going. I seen the Hercules stuff, but I didn't know what they were going to do with Xena. So one of the questions I asked is I said, I know that in Hercules you dealt with gods, but are you going to work with demigods? And Rob said, demigods? What do you mean by that? By the way, just so you know, all of us that have worked on the show, we all impersonate Rob wrongly, and we all know we're doing it while we're doing it. So, but Rob said, what do you mean by that? So I just on the spur of the moment, I said, for example, one of the demigods is a god named Morpheus, and if Morpheus has some desire to say, create a dream world where he could possibly entice Gabrielle, I'm just going with the story. And when I finished it, Rob says, that's a great idea. And I said, okay, it's a great idea, but answer the question, are we going to do demigods? And that ended up being my first episode, which was Dreamworker. So when I wrote Dreamworker, they wanted to hire me on staff, and I'd produced shows before, but they did not have room for another producer. So they asked me if I would sign on as a creative consultant, just give my input where I could. I said, sure, I love this. I enjoyed writing that first episode, it was great. So as I did that, Babs decided to move on to other projects, so she was leading the show. So I talked to RJ Stewart about it, and I said, you now have a producing position open, take a look at my resume. And RJ said, oh yeah, we should move you into that position, let me talk to Rob. And Rob was like, yeah, we should do that, and Rob talked to Sam. And Sam was like, yeah, why don't we do that? And then somebody talked to me, and so I was the supervising producer, and then I moved up to co-exec producer. So that's how I got involved with the show. The experience of working on that show, I was just down in the green room talking to Emily, oh my God, I forgot her last name. She was on Lost Girl. Yeah, she was on Lost Girl, Emily. I'll think of it in a second. But I was commenting to her about, because we were talking about Xena, and I said, one of the things that's really unique about this show is that we've been off the air for well over a decade. And we still have this incredible, large core fan group that has followed us. And I honestly don't know of another show that has that type of a history. You can talk about Star Trek. In fact, I had a conversation with Bill Shatner about this very subject. But as Bill pointed out to me, Star Trek has had some version of Star Trek in existence for the last 30 years. We've had this incredible gap. We, of course, know that a lot of people might have a movie. Yeah, it'd be great to have a movie, but we haven't even had that. We haven't even had, we just had basically the hopes and aspirations of our fans, and it's kept us really strong. So I've often tried to figure out why it is that is the case. Why did we have this longevity? It's not about babes and leather. It's cool, but it's not about that. I always find it funny when people say, oh yeah, that Xena show because she's half naked running around. Have you ever really looked at her costume? It's actually very conservative. She's wearing those like mid-thigh jean shorts underneath, it covers in the breastplate. But our show was never supposed to be about that. We had lightning in a bottle with all the people that came together because we all wanted to create interesting and fun characters and put them in interesting and fun situations. And we were not going to restrict ourselves by you are a sword fighting show, or you are a comedy show, or you're a camp show, or you're a serious show. It's one thing I will always give credit to Rob Tapper for it. We would come in with the most bizarre idea, and he would say, well, let's see what happens, let's see where we go. So we ended up with episodes of all over the map. But the core of it, the relationship between the two actresses, which you've probably heard of them, the way we wrote for that, the way it was directed, and of course the way they performed it together, that has created this base. And that's what put us into the forefront of the fandom situation and also this pop cultural thing. Now, Lucy was hired before I got on board. As most of you probably know, Lucy was not the first hire. She was not supposed to be Xena. The original Xena was Vanessa Angel. She was hired to do that. Vanessa Angel was the lead on the TV series Weird Science, not the movie, but the TV series. And a wonderful actress in her own right. But before she could fly down to New Zealand, she developed some sort of a sinus infection or a head cold and could not fly. So Rob called Lucy, because she had done some episodes of Hercules, and said, can you please just fill on this? As I said, I wasn't there, so this is secondhand. And apparently Lucy's reaction, she was out camping, believe it or not. She was out camping, she got on her mobile, as they call it. And her reaction was, first she said no, then she said, fine, if it's not a long-term thing, I'll come and do it. So she came in and did it, and obviously she absolutely cemented that character. I'm really good about saying things like, well, Harrison Ford had not done Indiana Jones. People say, well, nobody but Harrison could play it. Well, nobody could play the way Harrison played it. But, Tom Selleck was also the first choice for that thing, so it would have been a different type of thing. I honestly cannot imagine anybody else doing Xena except for Lucy. And I'm really good at this, and I can't. So she was already on board. Then Renee came on board. And Renee was in competition with, I think, 2 other actresses. And the 2 other actresses were very good actresses, but they were very sweet and bubbly, very much the ingenue, very, very pretty. And Renee still had a little baby fat, but Renee was a very serious actress. And I don't know who took which positions, but I know that in discussions with the studio, there was a faction that said, no, we want the cute, perky, sweet, bubbly. And the other faction said, if you want this series to last, we need an actress. That side won. If that side had not won, we would have killed off that character in the first season. I mean, if you think about the first few episodes of Xena with Gabrielle, because she was an annoying little blonde, redhead, it went back and forth. And she mostly stood in the background yelling, get him Xena, get him Xena. We needed an actress who could actually fulfill that, and Renee got the role. And by the way, here's the first time I ever met Renee, okay? I was going in for my first meeting with the Renaissance group. and the role had not been assigned yet. This was all in the